Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou ngā le panina o Muarā. Tēnā koutou ngā le panina o Naenei. Tēnā koutou ngā mea ātāhua o te moana nui a Kiwa. Tēnā koutou ngā tamatoa o Muarā o Naenei. E whakahoki atu e au ki ngā paitoa ngā huru o Hawaii nui, Hawaii ro, Hawaii pāmamao. Kei reira ngā pū, ngā take, ngā wū, ngā wānanga, ngā tohunga. I tupu mai te Māori nui, te Māori roa, te Māori whakaia. Tēnā te whakaputana ngā pū, nā ngā take, nā ngā wū, nā ngā wānanga, nā ngā tohunga. Ka puta ki te whai au ki te ao mārama, tūturu whakamaua ki a tīnā, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Nō reira, tēnā koutou ngā iwi o te moana nui a Kiwa. Tēnā koutou ngā whanaunga o ngā motu o te moana nui a Kiwa. Nō reira, ngā whanaunga o Hawaii, ngā whanaunga o Tutuira, ngā whanaunga o Rarohenga, Wawau Aotearoa, me e rātu motu o te moana nui a Kiwa, talofa lava, taloha ni, whakalofa lahi atu, tēnā koutou katoa. Nō reira, ki ngā toa, tama wahine toa o Mau, ngā tamatoa o Mau, tēnā koutou, kia ora, ki a koe te rangatira o Ngāti Whātua, o te taitokerau. Ka nui te mihi atu rā, kia koutou katoa, e runga i te aroha, me te rangi Māori o ngā mātua tūpuna o Muarā. Nō reira, āpiti hono te tātai hono, te hunga mate ki te hunga mate, āpiti hono te tātai hono, tātou te hunga ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. One of the beautiful things of working for Te Papa is we have these special occasions. We have the opportunities to learn about our history, both our history in New Zealand, but also our history around the Pacific and in Samoa. Sometimes we forget that we have ancient connections that go back 2,000 to 3,000 years. And the very name of our whare is Te Hono ki Hawaii. If I translated that into Samoan, it would be Le Whono i Savai. So within our languages are our connections. So I want to acknowledge all the people that have come from the many islands and have made New Zealand their home, Aotearoa their home, and also have contributed to the history of our place in the world and our place in the Pacific. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, no mai hara mai, piki mai, kake mai, tēnā koutou katoa, and I'd like to hand it over to Safua, who is the head of History and Pacific for the Museum of New Zealand Te Papa Tongarewa. Tēnā koutou katoa.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou mō te huihui mai nei, I tēnei kōrero, mau tūmārō. It's a real privilege and honour for Te Papa to welcome you all here on Rongo Marae Roa Marae to learn and share about some of our important stories of perseverance. Following on from yesterday's panel of speakers representing Parihaka and the Polynesian Panthers, tonight's panel is focusing on Takapara Bastion Point and the Samoa Mau movement. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Te Aroha Alec Hawk of Ngāti Whātua Ora Kei, Ngāti Whātua Kaipara and Tainui. Te Aroha Alec grew up in Ora Kei, Auckland, attended primary school and Selwyn College. He has been widely involved in youth advocacy, sports administration and coaching, and the creation of large employment initiatives, building relationships here in Aotearoa and Canada for 4 decades. He was also responsible for the very successful Atamira Māori in the City festivals held in Auckland. He was part of the Bastion Point land occupation which eventually resulted in a return of those lands to Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and was in the working group that identified the eventual return of the Auckland Railway lands and supported Ngāti Whātua's wider treaty claim for Auckland. In the 90s, he moved to Canada for 14 years and built extensive connections with First Nation communities there. He also worked with the Native Participation Committee of the Commonwealth Games in 1994, the North American Indigenous Games opening and closing ceremonies in 97, and joined the British Columbia government in 98 as part of the NISGA Treaty implementation team. And during his time in Canada, he hosted various Māori delegations and tours, providing a unique perspective on First Nations communities. Te Aroha is also a member of the Auckland Conservation Board, part of the Karaka No. 1 Ahu Whenua Land Trustees, and former member of the University of Auckland Board of Governors and Committee Mirai Ōrākei Trust. He was the Ngāti Whātua representative for the 2011 Rugby World Cup, coordinating Māori involvement in sporting and cultural events surrounding the competition. Tonight, Te Aroha Alec will be presenting on the history behind the occupation of Bastion Point from 1977 to 78. Please join me in warmly welcoming Te Aroha Alec Hawk to the stage.
E raurangatira mā, e whaia mā, e te iwi o Punike, honoured guest, those from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and from around the Pacific, tēnā koutou, kira mai tātou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to give an address about Bastion Point and the occupation and why Ngāti Whātua went up there. Before that though, we used to march down Queen Street back then, and I was just talking about all of to the people that used to march back then. We still see marches, but back then they were frequent. People were out there. People were saying things that had to be said. And even though we were ostracized, even though we were told to keep quiet, we did it. And it's because of that is that why we, I believe, got our land back. So I'm going to get straight into got to get my glasses on first. But one of the songs that we used to sing went like this. Bastion Point, Takaparapau is Māori land. You gotta make a stand for the people of the land. Bastion Point. Now this went on and on and on and on and on. And we marched from Ōrākei, right up Queen Street, back to Ōrākei, right up Queen Street, and we did that during the whole time after the occupation, because we were trying to convince the government that we were right and they were wrong. We took on the Crown head on, and this is the story of why we did it. Get my tato. So this is an early view of Okahu Bay settlement at Ōrākei. If you know Ōrākei, it's a pristine little village in Okahu Bay and surrounded by the most opulent properties in New Zealand. Paratai Drive, where there's $5 million properties surround our village. Ōrākei is now one of the most desirable places. Used to have 700 state houses, a lot of them gentrified now. Mission Bay just around the corner. St Heliers Bay just around the corner. Ōrākei, Mirai was right in the middle. It's just 3 k's from downtown, and it's right around the Auckland waterfront. This is an early view of our settlement. And there was no road going around the waterfront then. In 1840, when Governor Hobson arrived in Tamaki, Ngāti Whātua was living peacefully on the land as they did for over 250 years. Apihai Te Kauau, our paramount chief, gifted 3,000 acres to Governor Hobson and invited him to found Auckland. That gift of land is now commemorated on Key Street with a mural depicting our ancestor Apihai Te Kauau and the history of the founding of Auckland. Before that, there was nothing. There was a little plaque that says, "This is where we raise the Union Jack." Well, my kaumātuas didn't like that, and for years and years they wanted something to do about it. So we got the Ports of Auckland, and we told them, "Hey, you got to come out, we got to tell us, we got to tell the real story." So they came to the picture, and now we've got this commemoration for him down there. This is another picture showing our settlement. Our settlement was made up of all of our families, our close-knit families, just like settlements that were around the whole of New Zealand, just like every Māori settlement. No power, no running water. We had to survive back then. So at first the relationship was friendly. Government and settlers were keen to acquire land. We traded food. We helped them. There were many social occasions that took place in Ōrākei. City dwellers liked to come and picnic down at Okahu Bay where we were. Some of the many things that happened, we brought our wakas out and we raced them every year. Every year it's celebrated as Anniversary Day in Auckland, and these were the early days of that time. This is another picture of Okahu Bay. Notice that there was no roads going around there. Within decades, all of Ngāti Whātua's land would be gone, except for 700 acres, which was made inalienable. Or so we thought. It included the Ōrākei block, the village, the Mirai, the school and the cemetery. At a hearing in Native Land Court, Te Kauau was asked, who were the people who sold Auckland to the Europeans? The answer was, I did not sell it, I gave it to them. Did not the government give you money? Apihai says, no, I have been constantly looking for payment, but have not got it. Now this goes against what a lot of people think, that we got paid. And we honestly believe that we didn't receive what we should have. This is Okahu Bay before the sewerage pipe was built, right across our beach. That sewerage pipe is now the Tamaki Drive, which goes right across, right around the waterfront. This is the construction of it. Notice, our village was just a walk across. Our kaimoana was coming from our beach. We used to live off the land, we used to live off the sea. Rangi Totoa and the Waitamata used to be our breadbasket. And when the sewerage pipe was built, it had an effect on our people mentally, physically, and also healthy-wise. A lot of our people got typhoid. This is another picture of the sewerage pipe going across Okahu Bay, right in front of our papakainga, right in front of our village. That's another picture. Now, this picture shows the road on top of the sewerage. And this road was that led to the development of all of the eastern suburbs. Because from there, Mission Bay was developed, St Heliers Bay was developed, and some of the richest land around the Auckland waterfront was developed. They got power, they got water, and they got access to everything. Sorry, I've got to get my glasses on. By 1930, most of the land was in the hands of Pākehā buyers. So the city, and they were doing this constantly, they wanted to move us out. Not only the city, but successive governments. They tried to evict us. There were plans to move us out to the islands, just like how they did down Parihaka, just like how they did everywhere else. They wanted these Māori that were there for ever and ever to get out. They began planning. They began planning a garden suburb. But you know what? There was no mention of a marae. There was no plans for us. So during that time, you could see a build-up. And it was, I can only think what my mother and father and what their mother and father, because they were being conditioned. It was colonialism at its finest. It was what happened in India, what happened in Burma, what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Australia happened right here. And it didn't only happen in Ōrākei, it happened right across the motu. So, to this point, Ngāti Whātua, over a period of 90 years, took 8 actions in the Māori Land Court, 4 in the Supreme Court, 2 in the Court of Appeal, 2 in the Compensation Court, 6 appearances before the commissions or committees of inquiry, and 15 petitions to Parliament seeking restoration of their tribal land. They all failed. In 1951, we were removed. The Crown forced the sale of our last 12 acres of land at Okahu, leaving us landless. The houses in the marae were burnt down. Only the church and the cemetery remains to this day. Families were moved up to State House subdivision, which is commonly known as Boot Hill. So the move to Kitimoana Street took a heavy toll on the iwi, especially kaumātua, who keenly felt the loss of their papakainga down at the papakainga down below. And they felt the loss of their land. It was said that in 1951, the reason why they moved us up there was because the Queen was coming around the waterfront. She did. So that history is central to our decision to occupy. In 1976, Prime Minister Muldoon announced plans for high-rise luxury housing on Bastion Point. The land had been taken for defence purposes prior to World War I, with a promise that it would be returned to our people when it was not needed. It was never returned. It was given to the city, despite protests from our Ngāti Whātua kaumātua. At that point, the only land we owned was the urupā where we buried our dead. So to lose this bit of ground would be death blow to the mana and honour of Ngāti Whātua, said my brother Joe Hawk. So a concept building of the proposal. So on January 6, 1977, 30 whānau went onto the land. We didn't intend to stay long, so we needed a tent. We put up one. We needed a cup of tea. We lit a fire. It never went out. Ahika. It was the start of the occupation of Bastion Point. During that summer, the word went out and we had thousands come. It was the catalyst for quite a number of groups to come together and to assist us. And we're talking about unions, we're talking about the Samoan community, we're talking about the Tongan community, we're talking about the Pacific Island community, university students, you're talking about the whole gamble, you know, they just came and they had to be fed. The glue in all this was the Ōrākei Action Committee. They held it all together, led by my brother, Joe Hawk, by my mother, by my father, and by members of our community. It was a tight group. And soon we were growing our own food, we were welcoming hundreds of people, we were learning our Māori language, we were learning our tikanga, we were learning our history, and we built a marae, a meeting house called Te Aroha Nui. Alcohol and drugs was not allowed, right from the get-go. That building we needed because by June, July, it started to get winter. And so we needed something. So Whina Cooper came up and she says, I've got a friend that's pulling down a warehouse out at Woody. And so Tim Shadbolt and a number of the boys, the Bauer boys had a trucking company. So we got about 50 people out and we went out there and it was beautiful timber. It was kauri, it was rimu, it was everything. So we trucked it all back to the point and along with my brother Joe and others, we built Te Aroha Nui. And without that, we wouldn't have withstood the two worst winters that hit us in 77 and 78. We built huge gardens there to supply the kai. We were given kai by a lot of people. One of the things we had to do, of course, was fundraise. So we sent emissaries out to every university in New Zealand. We sent, with the union's help, we were going to workshops, work sites, we were going to churches, we were going everywhere where the story had to be told. So we had to build our own houses, and these are some of the mansions that we had. Started off with a tent, and then you had to build a box around it and put a roof up, and when it got cold and cold and cold, mind you, this one here is a trig station, which it's still there. The trig station still stands. And so we decided to pretty the place up because some people were saying, oh, looked a bit of an eyesore, but we weren't going anywhere. But during the summer, like I say, hundreds of people came up to help us. We built that as a watchtower, and it got turned into many things. If you have a look at our posters, it's an iconic piece, that watchtower. So many people from around the country and overseas came to support us, students, trade unionists, church groups, entertainers, Pākehā Māori Pacifica, and we had a visit from John Denver. He just rolled up one day. He said he's playing a concert at the St. James. and he heard about the struggle. He talked about him helping First Nations over in America, and he says he wants to help. And he did a concert for us. And he sang for about 2 hours. And during the intervening years, we were in contact with him, and he was always supportive. Now, music played a huge part in the spreading of the word. And this is a photo of the Herbs' first album. And what did they put on the front cover? This helped us tremendously. Just like to tautoko Will Ilalahia there, who was Herb's manager at the time. But sorry, that was after the event. What I wanted to say was that music was really an integral thing that helped us. It's hard when you're in a struggle, so you've got to have something. You've got to have something to keep you occupied, so music. And in saying that, we had quite a number of New Zealand's finest musos come up there to support us. A few of them have passed away now. Top Twins are still there, Moana, Hello Sailor, and to this day, they still come out and support. So we had concerts, protests, and meetings took place throughout New Zealand, and we even organised one that took place in London when the Prime Minister went over for the Glen Eagles agreement. Prime Minister Muldoon was over there, and we had 50 people out there. He wasn't very happy. So we had concerts up there. To this day, we still have concerts. We took the message around to all the concerts of the time. This is the Numbasa Festival in '77. We came down to Wellington, Puneke, and we had very good support down in Puneke. Every time something happened, they would come out down here and support us. Then in September '77, my daughter Joannie passed away in a tragic fire in my wife Miro and I's whare. And this will always be a painful legacy of Bastion Point for our whānau. We've built a memorial for Joannie up at Bastion Point, and if you're ever there, feel free to come up. So the eviction day, after 506 days, 600 police, military came onto the point to forcibly evict us. May 25th, 1978. Really a day of infamy, overkill. It was the largest police and armed forces operation since Parihaka. Over the years, we had been schooled on the necessity of passive resistance. We all went peacefully. During our time up there, we visited Parihaka. We learnt all about the passiveness of the Taranaki people. We learnt about what Gandhi did in India. And we learned about the peaceful protest all around the world. And we took it in. This wasn't going to be a violent episode from our side. And although people were wanting to hit back, they listened to our cry and they went peacefully. 222 of us were arrested. Our marae buildings were destroyed. Our dogs and our cats and our chickens got arrested. It was a pretty misty, foggy morning, but we could see the trucks coming over we could see the convoy coming over the harbour bridge from Takaparapau. We could see them snake their way around, and we had reports coming in about where they were, and you know, it was one of the longest days of our lives. It took them a while, but we could see them coming, and it was like, you know, me and my family and my hardcore supporters, we surrounded the memorial. Lots of people went inside the whare. There were over 150 inside the whare, singing. There was hakas going on. We didn't want to go let them know that we were going to go, well, we're going to go peacefully, but we were going to go loud. That's my mother and father to the right. My brother Grant. Yeah, my mum and dad got arrested. My brothers, all of these kaumātuas got arrested. They were, you know, all members of the Māori battalion. So after the eviction, a new cry, fight the charges. And this is where all of the marches came through. We marched up Queen Street so many times it wasn't funny. We had to fight the charges. Most of us pled not guilty. And we continued to protest to disrupt the court system until they did drop the charges. One of the many marches that we had up Queen Street. Eventually, the Governor-General, Sir Keith Holyoake, intervened and ordered a halt to the court proceedings, dismissing all the remaining charges. The future Prime Minister, Longi, was one of the lawyers that were representing us. We occupied Bastion Point twice more for brief periods, just to keep up the pressure against the Crown because it was going so slow. 78, 88, nothing. The second time we went up, 100 of us got arrested. 100 people got arrested. Oh, sorry, the first time we went up, 11 people got arrested. The second time we went back, 100 people got arrested. Most of those were wahine toa. Most of them were Māori women. Since then, we've had many concerts up the point to commemorate. So what do you do when you've got this, the largest, how do you remember it? So every 10 years we come out, and we did it in 1998, and that was an anniversary. In 2008, there was a commemoration. In 2018, I think, that was a reconciliation. So I'm going to get this right. 1978, 1988, 2008, 2018. Ten years after that is 2028? No, we are not there yet. Sorry. The third 10-year anniversary, we had a reconciliation. And we had the Prime Minister up there and all the members of the police came up. Just 2 years ago, we celebrated the 40th, and we themed that Reflections, looking from where we were and to see where we're going. In '88, the government announced it was accepting the Waitangi Tribunal recommendations to return Bastion Point to Ngāti Whātua. That's the only bit of green land, all of that we got back, and plus our urupa, and plus Okahu Bay. During that time, Rogernomics hit, and they were selling the farm. Everything was being sold. And so we occupied the Auckland Railway Station because that used to belong to us. We had a marae down there, and we occupied it. Some state-owned enterprise ended up having it, and they recognised our claim. Without going to the Waitangi Tribunal, they dealt with us, and now we have the Auckland Railway Station lands. We got title to that. What we did, we asked developers to come in and develop. Spark Arena's down there, ANZ, BNZ, you name it. Everything's down there on the proviso that after 15 years, we're going to come knocking for market rent. So in 2011, we went there and we knocked on these developers, and they went, no way, Jose, you're not getting zip. So we took them to court, and we won. And that is the basis of what we have as a legacy. It came through struggle, but now all of that bit down at Key Street is also part of our claim. Joe Hawk led that again. Joe was the most ostracised leader back then, not only from the Crown, but from a lot of people. He ended up in Parliament. So you see how it goes around, eh? He ended up down here in Parliament as a list member for the Labour Party. So reflecting on those events 40 years ago, we've been proven right. 25 years ago, the Herald called Bastion Point occupation a turning point for the nation. We succeeded with one of the first treaty claims, and we're now prospering with land assets, healthcare, education, housing for our iwi. It was a hard struggle, and the price we paid with the loss of Joannie was high. But we stood strong, we won, and we have prospered. So kia mai tātou, that's the brief. I wanted to tell you why we went up there, a little bit about it, but I've got my niece beaming in to just to say where we're going. So I'll come back just after this. Kia mai tātou.
To add to the discussions, and it's totally a privilege to be with the people of Samoa in this discussion in terms of the Māo movement. We only know a little bit of what's happened for your people, but there's a sense of solidarity in terms of us fighting for our land, for our whenua. So I'd like to acknowledge you as well. And that hope tonight goes primo. What I was going to add was, where are we now as Ngāti Whātua? You'll be getting, and may have already heard from Uncle Alec in regards to our history. We have become a private company, Ngāti Whātua Rākei Trust. I sit on the board of 9. We are charged with the task of making sure that our people have an opportunity to develop and to create the dreams that they need to in order for their families to survive this environment that we call home. And we're just coming out of the COVID-19 scare. There's still implications for all of us as a global family. And so we've spent a lot of energy just in the last couple of months making sure that our elders and our children are safe. So we are only a small iwi. We used to own the whole of Auckland, 80,000 acres. We now are able to say that we're one of the bigger players in the Auckland city area. We're the 3rd largest landowner in the CBD of Auckland. We, amongst other iwi, have a balance sheet that's pretty healthy, and we've only got that through the struggle of land. It's interesting that our present day, we're in the midst of taking the Crown to court for their cross-claims policy. What does that mean? We've got some land back, we've got a settlement in 2012, but there are other iwi who are being settled with the Crown, and the Crown is choosing to use some of the land that they know is rightfully ours as part of their settlement. So it's pitting us against each other. So we're going to court. We've got the ability now. We have, instead of the taiaha and the mere, our artillery is bigger. We have lawyers that we can afford to battle for us in the courts of Aotearoa. It's unfortunate that we have to do that, but we've risen out of being a landless people from 80,000 acres to only a quarter of an acre. So that gives you an indication of our commitment, that we have the resilience to see the kaupapa to the end. So whānau, it's just a little snapshot of where we're at today. We wanted to make sure that our children would never have to go through this struggle in their lives, and we're pretty confident that we've managed to do that. So I hope you have a good night, and it'd be great to catch the live stream, but unfortunately I won't be able to watch it until another time. So hopefully, Jackie, you can send us that. It'd be great to share with the whānau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Mihi nui, te aroha Alec and Sharon. I think te aroha has a music piece you'd like to share.
When my daughter Joannie passed away, a friend of ours wrote a song for her. I remember memories of you laughing in the sun, holding hands with all your friends, picking daisies on the run. And I remember you this day, how your smile was full of life, how your eyes shone up the night. How I miss you, my Joannie, how I miss you, my Joanne. Aotearoa has carried you far away from all this world. He has placed you by his side, placed you safely by his word. Oh, I will not cry for you no more, 'cause you are in a better place. 'Cause I can understand it now, why he took you, my Joannie, why he took you, my Joanne, why he took you, my Joannie, why he took you, my Joanne. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Te Aroha, for that very moving piece. I think we have a couple of minutes for some questions. And I'd like to open the floor to our audience, and hopefully the roving mic is ready. So please feel free to put your hand up, raise any hands for some burning questions. It's a great opportunity. Okay, well, oh, there's a hand there. Thank you, Jackie.
Kia ora, Alec. I'm just wanting to know about what happened to, obviously the buildings were destroyed on the land, but were they rebuilt? Was the Arahanui, Mirai or Wharanui reconstructed?
No, when they arrested us, the next stage was to bring the mobilisation crew to destroy everything, take it away. They left it, and then for the next 2 weeks, it was like they built the hugest light towers, so we couldn't go back on there. And so the police stayed in our territory for 2 weeks, and we weren't allowed to go back on. Few of us did. We got arrested again. I mean, it was just, you know, they wouldn't let us on, and they stayed there for 24 hours a day. So, no, we haven't had the chance to rebuild. One thing that we did tell them, it would be hell to pay if they destroyed the memorial we had there, and so they left that.
I meant to ask also on the land now, what is present? Is there a marae on the land now, or is it?
Yes, well, the marae is not on the actual site, but it's just around about, I'd say around about 500 metres away. And it's a beautiful piece, you know, it's a pristine piece. Just a matter of context, the marae was always there, okay? So if you're familiar with Auckland, our marae, which used to be down at the Papakainga, that was destroyed, and we didn't have a marae, but in the 1960s, our kaumātua came and started to build it, you know. And so that marae, our marae was finally built, and in 1990, it was built and ready for use and everything. It was being used constantly, and in 1990, we, the Ngāti Whātua, hosted the I think it was a sesquicentenary celebration where all the waka in New Zealand came to Okahu Bay, and we had 14 waka that came on the way to Waitangi, and all the kaihoi stayed in the marae. This is in 1990, January 1990, and somebody left the heater on, which got onto the mattresses and burnt the pillows, and our meeting house burnt in 1990. It was an accident. We didn't have fire alarms or anything like that, but we rose to the occasion and we rebuilt that. If you see the marae now, you'd notice that some of the charred big pieces we managed to save, to resurrect, but about 2/3 of it is all new. And we reopened it about 10 years ago.
All right. Well, any more questions, please feel free to have a kōrero with Te Aroha after our session tonight. Moving along to our second part of our panel. Ia, o te mua ona whaatarofa ma whaawhairoa I atu pa ia ma mamalu o tatou whaatasinea fiafi. Ai mei sur pa ia maulunga o Samoa, whaapeo tatou uso a Pasifika. Whaawhairoa I atu lau fionga tai mālie, o oer fofonga o le vai, e te se I lupe se e sa ili ai upore a inga sa tuala, tā lofa lava. It's a real pleasure to welcome our next panel, which focuses on the Samoa Mau movement. We have Taimalia Kiwi Tamasese, coordinator of the Pacific section of the Family Centre in Lower Hutt. She specializes in research around Pacific peoples, mental health, poverty, housing, unemployment, cultural, and gender equity. In that social policy space, Taimalia is engaged in the development of new social policy perspectives emanating from various Pacific cultural rationalities. She's also concerned with the impact of government policy decisions on the Pacific sector in Aotearoa, and includes documenting and analysing the effects of cultural dislocation upon Pacific communities here, on youth, patterns of migration to New Zealand, and also she's a regular speaker in terms of applied social policy in national and international levels. So please join me in warmly welcoming Taimalia and the Mau Collective.
Whaatulou I le tupua ma le la o ai, e whaatulou I le tapu masa o le malai nei, ia e maise, o lau susunga le taitai o le tātou polkalame I le nei yaso, whaapitai ta ili mālo, I lau susunga e maise fo o le I matamaitai, o lo o ngā lulue, I ngā luenga I tono le museum nei. Ai mei se, e tele ia tātou mea sina o lo I te tono. Whaatai le tau tapena ma le tau te wafifi. I le paa o tala o a tātou tau mawhainga. Sa I le ngā malo. I le I tū o le vai. I la wafionga. Au sunga foi. Koro Alec. Whaawhitai, o mawhai on tātou whaatasi le nei pō. I le susu o sui o le Samoan Advisory Council, le fio lau whionga, whaalua o mekti, whaapena lau whionga tā wao. I le susu o le tangata lau ele o loo, tau sia le mauta nei. I've spoken to you in Samoan. I apologize before the next presentation. It's going to be quite some time in presenting. Koro Alec, you well know the Pacific is quite a large ocean. So we will not rush the stories, as you have not rushed the stories, but we're very mindful that we better get on with that presentation because this is Aotearoa, New Zealand, and chronological time sometimes dictates that we finish within reasonable time. Friends, one of the challenges to our stories of perseverance is how do we pass on these stories to the next generations? Te Whaumalo and myself, and of course, Little Whaifopo are so, we are so encouraged that 5 young people have stepped forward tonight to present on the story of the tūmārō of Samoa, Mauapule, Mauatumuampule. The stories of perseverance, the continuing struggles to realize the hopes of those tūmārōs. So without further ado, let me introduce you. The first narrator will be Samoana Lilia Kiwi no Kise. The second narrator would be Le Tūmārō Paongo Parsons. The third narrator is, of course, Lana Cleverly. And the fourth narrator is going to be Tūlua Luatua. As I said, we're very encouraged that they've stepped forward as members of Tupuanga and Whasinomanga to tell the story of the tūmārō of Samoa. Okay, I hand it over to them. And we've been very blessed. We've got a singer from Auckland, Samoan young woman, and her name is Luka Lim Panin. We are really privileged to have her start the presentation today with a song, of one of the oldest songs of the Mauapule.
La le mo tola imaina la maleta nei le mo tola imaina ana ole ana po la uanga sala ile malo Sio tanu a fao angi mai le so te e se I moli ai ia va ve ma le tau veli o te ine e awe la mai le mo tau la I maina e le la maleta ene le mutaola I maina ana ole ana po la uanga sala I le malo sio tanu a fao angi mai le so te se I moli ai ia va ve ma le tau veli o te ine.
O le maua Samoa, stories of perseverance, activism, and resistance. O le atu vasa, Oceania or the Pacific, Oceania covers a third of the Earth's surface. It is often referred to as the aquatic continent. Oceania provides the connection between our gathering points or island nations throughout the region. The northernmost point of Pacifica is Hawaii. The southernmost point is the island of the Dreamtime in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The westernmost point is West Papua, Papua and New Guinea. The easternmost points, the Marquesas and Rapa Nui. For this presentation, I draw your attention to two nations of this vast ocean, Samoa and Aotearoa. I take you to Samoa, the start of a new day, the end of another. Our stories. The stories of our connections between Samoa and Aotearoa are told in our vegetation. Our stories were told and retold in oratory, in place names, in house names, and in our names. Recorded in rock formations, recorded by mountains, recorded by the sea, recorded by the land. Some of these stories are in the clear reflections of our pools. These stories are carried from one generation to the next, through articulations, through music, through dance, and through the speak of our landscapes, our rivers, our seas. Our stories with the coming of the missionaries began to be recorded in the written language. This trend began with the translation of the Bible into Samoan, and both forms of recordings have existed to this day. O le taiao ma le aso, the beginning of a new day, the end of another. Prime Minister of Samoa, Tui Atua Tupua Tamasese's Effie's address to the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York, 1978, says, "When Samoa talks about colonialism and repression, whether they be in Africa, in the South Pacific, in Asia, or elsewhere, it is not just rhetoric. Rather, Samoa's opposition to colonialism is fundamental because of its own experience. In 1848, 8 years after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand sought approval to take over Samoa. New Zealand was growing its Pacific Empire, which it thought would cover a wider region of the Earth's surface than Mother England's. The Home Office in London declined this request. In 1878, another approach was made by New Zealand for Samoa. Again, the Home Office declined New Zealand's request. 1899, the partitioning of Samoa. The partitioning of Samoa was agreed to by the great powers through the Berlin Act and allocated the eastern parts of Samoa to the United States and the western Samoan part to Germany. In return for their own non-involvement, Great Britain's colonial interests in Fiji, Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe, and South Africa would be protected. Samoa's drive for political independence and freedom from oppression began with the Mawapule in 1908. The nonviolent resistance movement originated in Savaii and was crucial to Samoa's journey for independence. Led by Tulafale, Arata Chief, Lawaki Namulau Ulu Mamwe, they worked to oppose German colonial oppression on the Samoan way of life through nonviolent activities to disrupt colonial operations. German governor at the time, Wilhelm Solf, persisted with Germany's control over Samoa for not only political, but economic and geographical benefits. In 1909, Solf exiled Lawaki and members of the Mawapule to Saipan for their involvement and resistance to his reign. Lawaki and several others passed away whilst in exile in Saipan, far removed from their ainga, their land, their home. His bodies and the bones of Ayatsa Taitoloa, Te Vanga, Letai, Tuilangi, and others were eventually returned to Samoa. They stood fast in their mau, in their resistance of oppression, till the very end.
In 1914, at the start of World War I, New Zealand was ordered by the Allied nations to take over Samoa because it was seen as a German territory, and the Allied nations needed a quick defeat of a Germanic territory to lever Bismarck psychologically. New Zealand imposed a military takeover, declaring the taking of Samoa as the first Allied victory of the First World War. The military occupation of the Expeditionary Forces of New Zealand was established in Samoa, suspending civil rights. In this period of military occupation, a pass system was introduced whereby people were issued with government passes to travel from village to village. During the same time, hospitals, schools and services were set up privileging Palangi and part Palangi citizens over Samoan citizens. The world was impacted. I always get emotional. Several generations later, I still get emotional by this. The world was impacted by the 1918 influenza epidemic, which spread across the world, including New Zealand. While influenza was a notifiable disease in New Zealand, no one had notified Samoa, so when the ship Tulun docked in Apia Harbour with passengers that had the influenza, no one owned up to this fact. The Auckland Port Bill of Health for the Tulun did not mention they had passengers with the flu on board. The influenza epidemic brought on the ship Tulun killed an estimated 25 to 33% of the total population, and in 1919, after such a huge death toll, the New Zealand Governor-General, the Earl of Liverpool, established the Samoan Epidemic Commission. It was entirely composed of New Zealanders. They were to inquire about the circumstances and causes of the introduction of the epidemic pneumonic influenza and examine whether negligence was a factor. In the opinion of the Commission, there is no doubt whatever the epidemic, pneumonic influenza was introduced into Western Samoa by the SS Tulun on the 7th of November 1918. The Commissioners noted being confronted by the widespread dissatisfaction at their meetings with chiefs. In conclusion, the Commission did not make any findings of responsibility or negligence. They noted that the Dominion of New Zealand was fully occupied with the influenza epidemic and so did not wish to make any criticisms of the conduct of individuals in a time of extreme distress. In 1920, after World War I, and as part of the war reparations, Great Britain took Samoa and gave New Zealand the responsibility for the mandate. Like the Gentleman's Agreement of 1899 that partitioned Samoa, this again was an agreement outside of Samoa, defining the governance of Samoa. In 1921, the Western Samoa Act was created in Wellington, making Western Samoa part of the New Zealand territory. With subsequent amendments, this act was the basic law of the land until independence in 1962. In 1922, the Samoa Offenders Ordinance became the legal basis for banishments, deprivation of chiefly titles, and degradations of leading Samoans. By 1923, the Administrator, Major Richardson, imposed bans on various Samoa customs, including the fine mat malanga, which engaged whole villages in this ancient custom. Abolishing it was resented and widely disobeyed, even by the Whaipule. In that same year, Richardson proposed a radical change to the land tenure laws. In his plan, each individual man was to be allocated an area of land. This was against the Samoa and customary land guardianship. In 1924, Richardson began to take away Matai titles from Matai when he disapproved of their activities. The New Zealand administration continued their interference with customary lands, which then extended to the planting of these lands, and they began banishments of leaders, banishing Tupua Masese Lealofi III to Leulu Moenga. He was brought to court and imprisoned for a week, and his title, like others before him, was to be removed, and again he was banished, this time to Asau Savai for his resistance to the banishments. Tamasese returned on a pau from our South Sava'i to Opolu to ask when his titles would be restored and to visit one of his children who was sick. He was arrested and imprisoned for 3 more months for breaking the banishment order. Richardson, in a letter to Gray, I shall be very unpopular with a section of the natives, but that will not worry me. If I find any of the natives intriguing against the government, I shall remove their titles, which I have discovered is the greatest punishment one can give. In the same year, 1924, the establishment of Pule Whaatoanga and Pulinu'u. Pulinu'u, as a branch of the administration, were given wide-ranging controls over local matters and became the ears and voices of the administration. Richardson also took a Malanga group to Sava'i. One of the members was a medical doctor, and in Whaia'ai, Richardson and his party were approached by villagers for help for a woman that had been in labour for 5 days. Whaumoina joined the appeal for help, and the doctor pointed to the Tuasivi Hospital 57 kilometres away. Richardson said to take her to the hospital in Apia, a longer journey across the sea. Both the woman and her child died, and this had a deep effect on many Samoans, and particularly Whaumoina. And by 1925, orders were beginning to flow down thick and fast in Samoa. More Matai were stripped of their titles, and a New Zealand school teacher at a Sava'i school sexually assaulted a number of boys. However, instead of being charged, he was quietly returned to New Zealand, where he murdered his wife and committed suicide. Samoans felt aggrieved that their children had been abused, but the offender was sent away scot-free. In exile in 1926, Taisi O.F. Nelson was told by letter of an administration order to all Samoans living in villages near Apia without employment to return to their own villages. This order was followed up with police action, resulting in sending people to prison.
Leading Matai had consistently voiced their opposition to such unjust measures, and Taisi O.F. Nelson also took action. Leading Samoans sought to have meetings with the New Zealand ministers responsible for the local administrators. While exiled from Samoa, Taisi met with ministers in New Zealand and further. In September 1926, Taisi O.F. Nelson met with Coates, the New Zealand Prime Minister, William Nosworthy, the Minister of External Affairs, and the Minister of the Cook Islands, Sir Maui Pomare. Taisi O.F. Nelson set out the grievances of the Samoans, including interference by Richardson in Samoa, prohibition, administrative expenditure, the lack of proper representation despite high taxation, and copra marketing. Feeling satisfied that Minister Nosworthy would visit Samoa to meet with the Samoans, Taisi O.F. Nelson returned to Samoa to a warm welcome on the 24th of September 1926. 2 days later, at a meeting, in preparation for the visit by Nosworthy, Maliatua Taunu'u Malifi the First, Tui Maliali'i Whano, Tuwha Eono, Afa Masanga and Whaamoina suggested that they form the Citizens Committee. On the 15th of October 1926, the first public meeting of the Citizens Committee attracted 250 people. Richardson was disturbed and responded by approaching Wellington for powers to handle the agitators. On the 12th of November, the second meeting was attended by 663 people, including Te Pua Tamasese Lealofi III. Police armed with batons surrounded the meeting hall, and the names of all the attendees were taken. The Citizens Committee resolved that they must send a delegation to Wellington, and so, as we do, fundraising began. Richardson took the view that the meetings incited agitation, And 13 days after the public meeting, he began to move against the most outspoken members. Whaumoina was tracked down by the police and issued with an order demanding him to return to Upolu and to remain in his village for 3 months. There is no evidence of any recourse to judicial hearings to inquire into these banishments. Aino Utasi and the secretary of the committee, Matariki, Karona, were about to leave for Savaii when police stopped them and ordered them to stay in their villages. Tūwhaiono was also warned he would be deported, like Laoki, if he continued. However, the attempts to stop the fundraising for the Malanga to New Zealand were not successful. Richardson, in a circular to all village officials, said that the names of every Samoan at the public meeting had to be taken down and all would be called before the whānau. The Samoan members of the Citizens Committee, Awhamasanga, Whaumoina, Ainuu, Alipia, and Tūwhaiono, prepared for a January trip to New Zealand to see Minister Nosworthy. When they went to apply for their passports, they were told that they had to provide their submissions to Richardson first. They protested this. All were refused passports. Nosworthy was said to be willing to meet with them. Te alavea whaitele, te alavea vaivesi, and savusa tauvela. All of the Whaleapuna were banished from their home village. January 1927, Alipia, Tuisila and Anai were banished from Mapia to their home village. Tui Male Ali'ifano then was suspended from his post as a whaitua. In March 1927, Richardson produced the Maintenance of Authority and Native Affairs Ordinance. The orders began to rain down again. By 19th of March 1927, the Citizens Committee had transformed into the Samoa League. From that point, the road towards the development of the Mau of Samoa, or Mau to Mua Mapole, resistance was set. The Mau had now its own constitution, and an office was established. On the 11th of June 1927, Minister Nosworthy finally met with the Mau. After meeting with the Mau, he telegraphed Wellington asking Cabinet to bring in the regulations to deport those involved in the agitation. Following Minister Nosworthy's visit, Richardson ordered all the Mau supporters in Lepere and Vaimoso to return to their villages. Deportations and exiles increased again. Taisi Oaf Nelson travelled to New Zealand at the end of June and presented a petition signed by 145 Matai to a joint House Committee of Parliament. The petition called for an investigation into matters that Samoans felt they had suffered. Richardson circumvented the petition and asked the New Zealand government to appoint a royal commission to investigate. The New Zealand Cabinet agreed. The Mau gathered in response. The Mau decided they would not pay taxes. Richardson responded by removing trading licenses from Mau sympathisers, and the banishments continued. Samoans ignored the banishment orders. The Mau policy of passive resistance spread quickly throughout Samoa. July 1927. The Samoa Amendment Act was passed, giving Richardson powers of deportation. August 1927. The Royal Commission arrived in Samoa again with New Zealand commissioners. In their submissions, the Mau witnesses traced the discontent and injustice back to the influenza epidemic. The Commission, however, accepted Richardson's line totally. With the Commission's report and the Samoa Amendment Act, Richardson could start deporting people. 13th of January 1928, Taisio Nelson went into exile. Further acts of resistance and defiance by the Mau continued. On the 13th of February 1928, a telegram was sent by Richardson requesting 3 warships to be sent immediately. Wellington responded by sending 2 Royal Naval vessels to Samoa to quell the Mau. The Mau never veered from its passive resistance. They did not commit any aggressive acts. On the 21st of February 1928, the 2 warships arrived in Apia, watched by Mau demonstrators in Apia. The Commodore noted that the streets were quite orderly and the Mau respectful. 2 hours later, Richardson was passing legislation to outlaw the Mau uniform. Arrests without warrants were also provided for. On the 24th of February, the naval officers rounded up 400 people from Beach Road. The Mau did not attempt to resist arrest. A further 150 of the Mau offered to be arrested. Richardson realized he was being outwitted, as Waimea prison could not hold 400 Mau, let alone 150 Mau. Another 150. Several days later, the prisoners had to be sent to a detention camp set up at the end of Mulinu'u Peninsula. Leading Mitai were all held in the prison camp, including Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III. Tui Malia Li'i Whano intervened with Richardson to stop the poor treatment of his people. Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III took on leadership while in the prison camp. He was part of a collective leadership group within the Mau Atumua Mapule. 3 days after arrival at the Mulinu'u camp, a court case against the 400 was held, citing they had acted to intimidate and compel people not to buy at stores in Apia. Te Pua Tamasese refused to plead for the 400 and refused to offer evidence. All 400 were, however, found guilty and imprisoned for 6 months. It was embarrassing as there was no prison big enough. Te Pua Tamasese was offered a position as whaitua. He refused. Pardon for 400 prisoners and an early election for Whaipule was offered. He refused. The Mau was uncompromising in its stand. The aim was New Zealand's withdrawal from Samoa and attaining self-government. By March 1928, the position reached a stalemate. For the Mau, life could be reasonably placid. The prisoners could come and go as they liked. There was a considerable number of liberty men who went to Apia in the day, returning at night in order to be present for breakfast time. The Mau often went to the movies in Apia in the evening. Richardson was having the problem of holding 400 Mau for 6 months. In the end, he was forced to concede total defeat. He remitted all 400 sentences. On the release of the Mau, Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III, leading the Mau, proceeded to Lepea. On the 8th of March, the police tried to arrest Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III once again. On the 9th of March 1928, the warships left. 300 men arrived from Palauli, Savaii. Thankfully, Nosworthy finally ordered Richardson back to New Zealand, and on the 8th of April 1928, Richardson left Samoa in disgrace. On the 5th of May 1928, within a month, Colonel Allen replaces Richardson, arriving with 74 men of the newly created Samoa military police. They arrived armed with rifles, pistols, and 2 Lewis guns. On the 8th of May, he sent a telegram, "Mau inactive, so am I." Allen had a careful work routine and was determined to destroy the Mau. He believed in a policy of silent and hidden movement, backed up by the military police. On the 26th of May 1928, attempted arrest of Mau in Solosola gathering using rifles with fixed bayonets. 9 Mau supporters were wounded. Leota was arrested and imprisoned for 3 months. A new stage was reached for Samoa military police and Māori confrontations. The police claimed they were under attack. The wounded told a different story, and there were no injuries for the Samoa military police. In June 1928, the Mandate Commission of the League of Nations met in Geneva and heard reports from former German colonies. The New Zealand government was represented by London-based diplomat. Taisi Oaf Nelson attended, presenting a petition from 8,000 Samoans expected to pay poll taxes. Samoa's petition asked that the mandate be handed over to Great Britain, or that they may be granted self-government. At the same time, the Chinese were also subjected to terrible treatment and poor and unfair judicial processes. Taisi Oaf Nelson found little justice and persevered, returning to Great Britain to appear this time before the Judicial Committee to appeal his deportation order. On the 9th of July 1928, the Judicial Committee could not undo the terms of the deportation order unless he allowed himself to be arrested. In October 1928, Allen decided now was the time to break up the Māo. He was powered by the Samoa Amendment Act in 1927 to ban Māo members for up to 2 years. November 1928, Allen decided he could get better results by arresting Te Puatamāsese Leofi III. This time, there would be no shameful failure. Only white police were engaged in the arrest of Te Puatamāsese Leofi III. 35 police and 2 officers carried bayonets, machine gun and live ammunition. Te Puatamāsese was arrested in Vaimoso at 5 a.m. He was charged with contempt of court for ignoring a summons relating to the non-payment of taxes from 1927. He was again sentenced to 6 weeks jail. Te Puatamāsese was also charged with resisting arrest and sentenced to 6 months imprisonment to be served in New Zealand. Brenson from the External Affairs Division escorted Te Puatamāsese Leofi III on the voyage to the Mount Eden prison. Suffering seasickness, Te Puatamāsese Leofi III was handcuffed to his bunk. The ship arrived in Auckland on Boxing Day, and Taisi Oaf Nelson met them. On arrival, Te Puatamāsese had a fever and was sent to the prison hospital. In January 1929, Ale Tamasese arrives with their children. Only weekly visits were allowed for Tamasese. Sir Maui Pomare had attempted fate by taking on the government in which he was a minister on behalf of the Māo. He also visited Te Puatamāsese in his Mount Eden prison cell. Today, I saw Tamasese. I greeted him in his own tongue. We sat and talked of many things. I said, Tamasese, I am sorry to see you are here. I came but to see your face. And so I looked into the countenance of a tama Aotearoa, deprived, degraded, and deported and imprisoned. Brennan also visited, asking Te Puatamāsese Leofi III about visiting sites in New Zealand. Te Puatamāsese responded, I am a prisoner and not able to do any of these things. When my sentence expires and I am released from prison, then I shall please myself. I do not accept anything from the government. I shall remain steadfast in the Māo of Samoa. In response to the imprisonment of Te Puatamāsese Leofi III in Auckland, the Samoa Defence League was formed. The League's meeting of over 1,000 people was addressed by Ala Tamasese. She spoke from the perspective of the women of Samoa who had witnessed unwarranted insults and degradation imposed on the men of Samoa. Alfred Skelton, a known advocate for Irish republicanism and a leading lawyer, assisted the Samoans. In January 1929, Skelton filed an action against moving Te Puatamāsese Leofi from one part of the empire, Samoa, to New Zealand. The case was unsuccessful, as Samoa was seen to be within the League of Nations and therefore not covered by habeas corpus. Te Puatamāsese Leofi III served the rest of his sentence at Mount Eden prison. The Māo continued in Samoa, and Allen wrote to Wellington asking for Te Puatamāsese to be kept in prison beyond the term of his sentence. On the 4th of June 1929, Tamasese was released and returned to Samoa. On his arrival, he was served with another summons for the taxes he had already been imprisoned for. In November 1929, the Mau petitioned King George V, pointing to the Berlin Act, where the three powers in 1889 had signed a declaration recognizing the independence of the Samoan government and noted that the Samoan people had no say in the matter of the loss of their independence. On the 29th of December 1929, Smythe and Skelton were arriving into Apia port from Auckland. Smythe was returning and Skelton was gathering evidence for a court case for Taisi O.F. Nelson against the New Zealand Herald. The Mau, including Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III, were camped at Vaimoso and they marched, unarmed, to welcome the Aucklanders. Braesby was keen to arrest any of the Mau who had warrants and waited, armed, for their arrival. The Mau were expecting up to 3,000 Mau supporters that morning. One larger group was marching from Vaimoso to the wharf. The other group was marching towards the wharf from eastern Apia, planning to converge at the wharf. Tui Mali Alifo Fono and Foi Moina accompanied this group along with Tamasese. Matautia, an elderly man and conspicuous with a huge drum in his brass band, was spotted by Braesby, who held a warrant for his arrest on tax evasion. He telephoned ahead and Matautia was dragged from the band. Matautia was defended by the Mau men and protected while the police drew their guns and tried to shoot, but the gun didn't work. An officer signaled with a whistle as prearranged, and the police responded brutally. The procession from Vaimoso, aware of the noise but not of the cause, kept walking into the action. Amongst them was Te Pua Tamasese, who ran in through the ranks calling, "File mu! File mu!" Many were wounded, some fatally, and lay bleeding on Beach Road. The Mau group marching from eastern Apia were stopped. One policeman made it back to the Lewis gun, and others with rifles faced the road junction and began to fire. Frightened marchers were walking dangerously right into the firing lines. Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III, dressed in white, and holding up his hands with his back to the police station, walked into the open, calling out in both Samoan and English, "File mu Samoa," "Peace, Samoa." One shot was fired before the machine gun fired. A .303 bullet struck him in the thigh, through the muscle and femur, shattering his pelvis. Collapsing, he was shielded from further injury by Soa, Faualo, and Tufunga. Eventually, the firing stopped, and the police realized that they were not, and had never, been under attack. The Mau began to pick up the bodies of their dead and their wounded and returned to Vaimoso. As they did, the police re-emerged with rifles, bayonets, and their machine gun, following the Mau to the edge of Vaimoso. C. Cronfield visited Te Pua Tamasese in the hospital, whose last appeal endures today. My blood has been spilt for Samoa. I am proud to give it. Do not dream of avenging it, as it was split in maintaining peace. If I die, peace must be maintained at any price. Te Pua Tamasese Leolofi III, Tamainga, should have been buried with his father and other high chiefs at Molinuu. But fearing further violence from the police, he was buried with other men who were killed on the 28th of December 1929. They included Tapu of Awala, Whaimuina of Safotu, Ainoa of Tuinai, Vele of Vaimoso, Mingao of Vaimoso, Leota Tuiao of Vaimoso. The Mau reported nearly 50 were seriously injured, and one more died of his wounds in February 1930. One New Zealand constable also died, Abraham. Mau leadership was then taken up by Whaimuina. On the 31st of December 1929, New Zealand Cabinet emergency meeting resolved to send reinforcements to Samoa. Administrator Allen reported to New Zealand that the Samoan military police had shown great restraint. A campaign of harassment ensued and curfews were imposed. The Mau was declared a seditious organisation. The Mau members had no choice but to go into the hills and forests. The inquiry into Black Saturday was opened by Chief Judge John Luxford in his capacity as coroner on the 2nd of January 1930. His verdict was published on the 4th of February. He found that the gunfire on Ifi Road, both machine gun and rifles, that led to the deaths of Tapua, Tapu, Ainoa, Mingao, Whaimoina, Vele and Tuia, unnecessary and implied that the 3 policemen armed with rifles be liable for charges of manslaughter. However, no charges were ever laid. New Zealand was satisfied. The matter was concluded when the verdict was tabled at Parliament. Minao, with the Mau men taking refuge in the bush and hills. In Upolu, women and children were becoming increasingly used to the terrorizing raids of armed men at all hours of the night, damaging and destroying their homes and property as they searched the villages for anything linked to the Mau. The tension continued to build between the Mau, now somewhat underground, and the administration, with the administration carrying out several missions without much success. Open political activity continued, with the growth of the Women's Mau, led by Ala Tamasese, Rosabelle Taisi, Nelson's estranged wife, Whai Moisami, Whaimoina, and Masiofo Tui Maliali'i Whānau. After the police raids in Vaimoso, they began to hold protest marches. After a young Mau man, Whitialo, was shot in the hillside, a truce was declared. In New Zealand, the native minister Sir Apirani Ngata spoke in Parliament in defence of the Mau of Samoa, saying, "Our sympathies are naturally with the Samoans, and the whole world can know it. When Tamasese was imprisoned and brought to Auckland for not paying taxes, the Māoris wondered why they, the Māoris of New Zealand, were not imprisoned for not paying taxes."
On Monday, 3rd March 1930, the Mau members of the administration alongside the Fautua met at Tupua Tamasese's Maota in Vaimoso. The Mau was represented by 50 chiefs, led by Whaimoina and Tui Maliali'i Whānau. Allen, Cobb, Blake, Jeffries and the Secretary for Native Affairs, Frank Lewis, represented the administration. The end of the Mau, the surrender of persons who have committed offences, chiefs to meet the administrator in whono whenever required. In response to this list of demands, Whaimoina stated, "No one person could claim control of the Mau. A discussion was needed before answers could be given." Challenged on whether the laws would be obeyed, Whaimoina explained, "We will not break any law if we are satisfied with it, but we will break laws if we are not satisfied with them. You might know very well that we oppose the regulation with regard to taxation because we were not satisfied. Wednesday, 5th of March, 1930, Tui Maliali'i Whānau makes what was described by the New Zealand administration as a tough speech. "My heart is filled with love for my people. Many thousands of Samoans
have been buried in the earth. Act as Christ taught us. Be truthful. You mentioned that there are people that have committed offenses, and how about you? There are also people who have committed offenses amongst you. Now you said to end the mau. Deal with us carefully. And how about killing the mau, like animals? That is very bad. We know the custom in enlightened countries. When a man's hands are lifted up, there is no firing. What I want now is to let the mau live until it gets what it wants. And with regard to the mau uniforms, they do not hurt the government. There are no bullets in them. Let us wear our uniform until we get what we are aiming for. Friday, 7th of March, administration representatives met again at Vaimoso, this time at the request of the mau. The mau set out a list of questions they wanted answering, including that mau members be allowed to be tried in court if there were offences. Monday, 10th of March, 1930, Marines arrived at Vaimoso. Described in the letter to Nelson, at once they began tearing the stripes off our lava lavas. As we were sitting there having ava, they ordered us to disperse. They said they would take us to jail if we would not disperse. We replied, take us all. We then stood up near the main road and marched to the Waimea prison. Only Tui Maleali Ifano and several others were imprisoned. The rest were sent away. May 1930, the new Prime Minister and Minister of External Affairs, George Forbes, showed no greater intolerance or willingness to compromise than his predecessor. July 1930, the Women's Mau petitioned in protest of the lack of administrative or judicial action following the Black Saturday shootings. Allen, they petitioned, had not initiated prosecutions against the police. Our prince was killed whilst in the act of holding up his arms, calling for peace, but Forbes was unmoved. 1930 annual report. The Samoan women were referred to in degrading terms by the administration. Taisi O.F. Nelson unsuccessfully petitioned Parliament to have the report withdrawn. 28th of December, 1930, the first anniversary of the Black Saturday was approached nervously by the government. Crown Solicitor McCarthy, it is claimed, went so far as to threaten the mau that he would turn any memorial service into a slaughter greater than that of 1929. April 1931, Allen's term thankfully came to an end. 16th of May, 1933, Taisi O.F. Nelson arrived home after being exiled from Samoa for 5.5 years. 16th of November, policemen raided Nelson's home, and a week later, Nelson was arrested and charged with sedition. 18th of December, 1933, Taisi O.F. Nelson's trial reopened. 3rd of March, 1934, Luxford found Nelson guilty of aiding and abetting the mau, sentencing him to jail for 8 months and exile for a further 10 years. Taisi was taken straight to Waimea prison, refused permission to attend to his business affairs, and within 24 hours, put aboard the vessel Maui Pomare. 19th of March 1934, Taisi arrived in Littleton, taken by train to Christchurch prison, where he was held until the 22nd of July 1936, when he returned home to Samoa once again.
Self-governance. In 1946, the trusteeship agreement was approved by the United Nations General Assembly. The following year, 1947, a special mission on the Trusteeship Council arrived in Samoa and reported that Samoa was not yet ready for self-governance. However, constitutional advances were to be made to increase their own responsibility in government. 1950, another visit was made to Samoa, another request for immediate self-governance. Once again, this was declined. 1952, Executive Council was established, working with the High Commissioner on policy formation and implementation of the government of Western Samoa. In the progress towards self-governance, a working committee was formed the following year in 1953 to prepare recommendations for submissions to Constitutional Convention. The first Constitutional Convention took place in 1954. In January 1959, a second working committee was formed to draft the Constitution for the future state of Western Samoa. This working committee was chaired by Tupua Tamasese Meaole, Malietoa Tanumafili II, as well as Mataafa Mulinu'u II. Also present was Tui Maleali'i Whānau. The working committee then released a draft to the public for their consideration and suggestions. In October that year, Samoa's first Prime Minister, the Honourable Fiame Mataafa II, was sworn into office. August to October 1960 saw the sitting of the Second Constitutional Convention, involving 170 Samoan citizens, representatives of all the different constituencies. They deliberated on the recommendations found by the Working Committee and took great care in questioning and providing security for the rights and protection of the future state of Western Samoa. December 1960, the United Nations approved for the holding of a plebiscite on these questions. Do you agree with the Constitution adopted by the Constitutional Convention on 28th October? And do you agree that on the 1st of January, 1962, Western Samoa should become an independent state on the basis of that constitution? This was a very full consultative process with all the villages prior to plebiscite day. The UN officials and the administrators of the plebiscite visited all districts to explain what the plebiscite is and the key points of the constitution. Meetings were held where people with opposing views were included. The administration launched a mass campaign of information through radio where both schools of thought were allowed to be expressed. The plebiscite was held on the 9th of May 1961 and made provisions for all Samoans in Samoa, Wellington, and Auckland to vote. The results released on the 24th of May 1961 confirmed 83% voted yes in favor of the Constitution being adopted, and 79% voted yes in favor of Samoa becoming independent. Informing the choices of articles in the Constitution. Now, the partitioning of Samoa was a gentleman's agreement by the three superpowers, the US, Great Britain, and Germany. The fate of Samoa was made outside of Samoa by non-Samoans. The handover of Samoa to Germany, to Great Britain, mandated to New Zealand, and later under the Trusteeship Council, then Samoa continued to be administered by New Zealand. Again, these decisions were made outside of Samoa by countries who were foreign to Samoa. Both administration periods had tragic consequences on the people, the land, the culture, and social arrangements. Samoa had always had control over its own affairs and insisted on returning to that. here are some of the tragic experiences that became pertinent to what we now see in the Constitution. The exiles, as experienced in the Mawapule and the Mawatumua Mapule. The killings of thousands through New Zealand's utter negligence in the 1918 influenza epidemic. The military rule and the suspension of civil rights. The banishments, the taking of titles, the imprisonments, the slaying of Mau. All point to the insistence that is now contained in our Constitution, as worked out and agreed to by the Constitutional Convention members, the voting age members of the country, both in Samoa and in New Zealand, and lastly, by the United Nations itself. For myself as a young person, researching and reading through the documentation of these processes has left me with an incredible amount of admiration and respect for our elders, our leaders, our trailblazers. To reflect on the immense struggle our people went through, all the way up until where they took the utmost care and deliberation in drafting a constitution to protect us, our way of life, our lands, and our future, is nothing short of emotional. It was us, the Samoans of today and the Samoans of the future, who were always at the forefront of their minds. But where has their word led to now?
Samoa celebrated its 40th year of independence in 2002, and the New Zealand Prime Minister at the time, Honourable Helen Clark, was invited to attend. She knew the history of New Zealand's colonisation of Samoa with its resultant atrocities. She saw this as an opportunity for New Zealand to publicly acknowledge and apologise. Tuia Tua Tupuata Masese Efi acknowledged and received the Prime Minister's wish to apologise, acknowledging wrongdoing and offering apology, and this receiving of such is ritualised in Samoan culture through the ifonga ritual. The act of apology is an act of courage that restores the relationship between villages, families, and in this case, countries, and Samoa responded with courage. There was a government reception of the apology, there was the people's reception of the apology, there was representation of the Mao's reception of apology. The acceptance of the apology was sealed and symbolised with the handing over of an ancient fine mat, le angea o Tumua. Le angea o Tumua is placed here at Te Papa, and we are joint guardians. So now to the relationship between our history and the 3 amendment bills tabled in Parliament in March this year. I invite you to consider these carefully. The separation of the judiciary, the executive, and the Parliament was deliberate. In the past, it was the administrators who were in control of the judiciary, and this informed the insistence by the constitutional conventions that the judiciary must remain separate from the executive and the legislative. Fundamental rights were carefully chosen, and the experience of the Mawapule and the Mawatumua Mapule both informed and enlightened these choices. During the Constitutional Convention, questions posed as to whether these fundamental rights protect our Mitai titles and our lands. The answer was emphatically yes. The demarcation between individual rights and the collective land rights have been removed. But the land is us, and we are the land. The institution of the Pule Nu'u was part of colonial New Zealand, and the Pule Nu'u system attempted to reach into our heartland, our Nu'u, and our Ainga. We stood strong and we won. Central government and whainga malo and whainga Nu'u live in a delicate balance. Too much interference from central government means Ainga and whainga Nu'u become strangled. The innovative solutions to the life of our people become dictates that must be obeyed. The independent and the interdependent nature of our culture, our people, our lands, turns into dependence awaiting mercies of government and the next international loan providers. The procedures of the plebiscite both illuminate and challenge. It has been said before about the careful process that was inclusive and informative, and the procedures of the constitutional formation and its plebiscite was deliberate, inclusive, and respectful. These procedures opened a space for the descendants' voices. We, the peoples of Samoa, have been giving so much, and we in turn have given in so much. This is certainly not the time to forget that. Ia manuia.
Dear friends and families and extended families, and all those of you who are part of the struggles of the Pacifics here in Aotearoa and in support of our Māori brothers and sisters struggles here in Aotearoa, we acknowledge your participation in those struggles and thank you very much for your supports. Dear friends, I know we've gone over time. I invite you to join us for conversations. And we ask for your prayers and your toleration of all these struggles as we walk into the future. Hopefully we are able to take the dreams of those who struggled before us and hand it over to the younger people of tomorrow. Aotearoa.
Ia, whawhitai lava mo le tātou whaasoa mo tūna inga ne awhiawhi. Whawhitai tele lau whionga tai malie mo lau sosoani whaasoa. Whawhitai whaapitoa tupulanga talo vau. Mai lātou uma o mawhai on whaatasi mai ne awhiawhi. Manuia tele tiute mawhai vau lo whengai ai. Ai meise o le whaafonga mai o tātou atu motu o mo le Pasifika. Ia whaamanuia le atu i teimi o lo tutoe o le ne awhiawhi. Whawhitai mai a soifua.
O tēnā koutou, e rua ngā mahi kei te toi. There's only two things left to do. One is to acknowledge our speakers for tonight. So kei te meha tira ki ngā kai kōrero mo te pōnei. One of the things I do want to acknowledge is that two different conversations about two different topics, one from Aotearoa and one from Samoa. But both are critically important for our nation. Ko te kai a te... Oh. Ko te manu I kai I te miro, nōna te ngahere. Ko te manu I kai I te mātauranga, nōna te ao. The bird that eats the berries belongs to the forest, but the bird that eats of education belongs to the world. So what I want to do is acknowledge both sets of speakers. I want to acknowledge the leadership that their specific families, ainga, have offered to our nations. And I do want to say, kia koe te rangatira, sometimes our families pay the price for that leadership. So I just want to acknowledge you and your daughter. Ka nui te mea tura kia koe, tangi nei te ngākau mau, tangi atu nei te ngākau ka puta nei ngā roi mata mau me tō whānau. And I want to acknowledge our speakers representing Samoa, the Mau movement. One of the things I appreciated about the conversation that you led with us is the detail, the beautiful detail that you presented to us, the research that was provided to us, which meant that we didn't actually have to go out and look. You provided us with nourishment tonight from your history, and it was beautiful. So kia ora koutou, talofa. Thank you very much. And we have some gifts to present. I do want to acknowledge Jackie and the tremendous work that Jackie has done. So these are books from Te Papa. And I do want to acknowledge the Te Papa staff here, the kaimahi, the curators, the collection managers. There's quite a number here. Yep, I don't mind. And one thing, as the gifts will be provided to our speakers, I do want to ask our Samoan brothers and sisters, mamas and papas, if you can lead us with our final hymn, and then I will close with a prayer. Oh, what we're going to do, we will sing He Hone Rehe Kororia, and then we'll do the Samoan hymn, and then I'll close with a prayer. Well, I'll let the Samoans lead the Samoan hymn. So, e tū tātou, e tū tātou. I think we do have the words for He Honore.
E honore, e karoria, marango ki te whenua, whakaro, pai e, ki nā tangata katoa. Ake ake, ake ake, amine. Te atua, te pirangia, tōku oranga, tōku oranga.
Nō reira ki hoa ngā mano matua tamawairua tapimi ngānai pono me te māngai. Tēnei mātua e whakahoki ki tā koutou aroaro i te reo whakamoe me te whakawhetai. Whakawhetai mō wēnei kōrero e pāna ki wēnei kaupapa e rua o te moana nui a kiwa me Aotearoa. Nō reira i hoa manakitia mai mātou i roto i tēnei rā. Wa manakitia mai mātou o mātou whānau, me ngā kaumātua karaua kuia, puta no wēnei motu o Aotearoa te waipaunamu whiti atu ki reo kohu. Nō reira i hoa whakaungia mai mātou i roto i tā koutou arohanoa, paheretia ki te rangi Māori ngā wā katoa, ko koe anō te timatanga me te whakaotinga o ngā mea katoa, aia nei, ake ne, amine. Kia ora.